morning. Welcome to WNHH FM's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Well, we just got through an election here last week. Now another election has taken place, this one in another country. And a reporter here in New Haven is watching closely. The election is taking place in Israel. It's a do-over with a lot at stake. Tzipi Shmilovitz has been watching closely. She grew up in Israel. She now lives in New Haven, where she works as an American correspondent for Israel's largest circulation newspaper, Yediot Ahronot. Tzipi was gracious enough to make time to join us here in the WNHH studio to tell us what tomorrow's election is all about and why it matters. Good morning, Tzipi, and thanks for coming in.
Good morning, Paul. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
And thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support today, Bertram Moses PC, and Gateway Community College. So now, help me understand something. You were here in April. There was an election in April.
Yes.
Israel elected its parliament and prime minister in April. So why you have another election?
Because the way the system works in Israel is that it's incredibly difficult to build a solid coalition that can govern for 4 years, especially now when the country is so divided, and when you have tons of small parties that can just squeeze in and get 2 seats.
So you have
seats.
a parliamentary system. Unlike our winner-take-all system, you elect members of parliament, and then whoever, and there are a lot of parties, as you mentioned,
Yes.
and then the president says, okay, you seem to have won potential prime minister. See if you could put together a coalition of enough parties that you have a majority in parliament, and then you get to be the prime minister.
Exactly. And what's going on in the last couple of elections is that it's always, the Knesset is 120 seats.
That's the parliament. You need 61.
You need 61. But 61 is a very fragile majority. Anyone can extort whatever they want. Give me what I want or I'm going away. And that's basically what happened now. It happens a lot in Israel in the last couple of decades. I guess it's a sign of democracy in trouble.
It happens a lot in Italy.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Israel started to be like Italy.
Case closed.
So in the last election, it was pretty close between Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud coalition and Benny Gantz, who's a centrist. Likud is a right-wing party, who was a former general. He had a coalition, the Blue and White Coalition, and Netanyahu was asked to put together government, but he couldn't get the 61 votes. That's why we have a do-over tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know,
and it did not, even though he failed to build a coalition, it did not did the traditional thing of returning the mandate to the president and tell him, okay, somebody else could try. He didn't do that. So that's why we have
They called for new elections.
Yeah.
So now it's the same cast of characters at the top.
More or less. There are some slight changes.
So Netanyahu is trying to hold on to power. He's been in and out of power since 99, correct?
Yes.
And he's sort of like this generation's, hard to think Israel without him as the prime minister.
Yeah, you have a whole new young generation of very, very young people who cannot, at this point, they cannot envision Israel without Netanyahu as prime minister.
And then Benny Gantz, they stay still close again.
Yeah.
Because Netanyahu has been plagued by corruption scandals. If he gets elected, he wants everyone in his coalition to agree that he can't be prosecuted because he's about to be indicted.
Pretty much,
But you say it's a divided country. But I get the sense from afar the division is not about the big issue, which is security and how to deal with Palestinians, right? That's not the big division in Israel. Isn't the big division in Israel between secular and religious society?
Yeah, that's the shift that we've seen in the last decade or so. And the reason is that the more Netanyahu became almost a king, the more, but at the same time, he really is plagued with a lot of scandals and a whole bunch of he may very well go to jail if he's not the prime minister.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like a president we have over here.
Yeah, it's kind of similar, yeah. And in order to survive, and he's very good in survival, he just built the coalition that he can. which is mostly incredibly right wing and incredibly religion.
Mhm.
So the way,
Meaning that the ultra orthodox don't they're the fastest growing part of society, right? So they've gotten more power over the years. Their men don't have to serve in the army,
yeah,
correct? That's a big issue in society, and they get to have the ultra orthodox be the religious authorities in the state. So if you want to get married and you're Jewish but you're not ultra orthodox,
yeah,
or like your spouse was converted in America but not by ultra orthodox, you have to go to a different country
yeah,
to get
yeah.
and
It's
if
it's
you want to pray at the Western Wall and you're a woman, you can't go to the men's section and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. It's a very unholy union between people who are actually very secular, but they are very right wing when it comes to politics and security and all that, and they live with very very extreme religion parties. And together, the thing about tomorrow is that there is a plausible scenario in which Netanyahu can build a coalition with only extreme right wing religion parties.
Mm.
That's honestly that's the big question about tomorrow. It's not whether um, anyone else can win. It's
Mm.
about whether Israel can avoid a situation in which it's being ruled by an extremely almost fundamentalist government.
Mm. Because again, I'm thinking about America. So in America, in the last generation, there's been this alliance on the right that now runs the country.
Yeah.
And it's an unholy alliance too, because they're coming from very different sides. One is a secular right wing side of the government and of the Republican Party, which is their whole interest is let the rich get richer and don't have environmental protection and don't step on corporate profits and that kind of stuff, the Koch brothers. And then you have the side that's the Christian fundamentalist. And since Ronald Reagan's day, they've been together. And the question is, will that always stay together because they're not in the same space? Like, for instance, a fundamentalist had to decide with Trump, would they take a secular person who, sexually assaulted women and been divorced all these times, that kind of stuff. But they did because he delivered for them on their Supreme Court.
Exactly.
So it sounds like in Israel, you have the same thing. You have the religious fundamentalists who, what they care about is religious control of the country. And then the non-religious secular right, I guess we're going to have to name the third name here. It's represented by Avigdor Lieberman. Very interesting guy. Great profile of him today in the Times. But he's from the right wing, but he's not religious.
Exactly. And he is probably the one who's going to decide what's going to happen after the election tomorrow, because he's projected to have 6, 7, 8 seats.
Right.
And he will decide. And he is indeed incredibly interesting. He's a very right wing on national security. When it comes to the economy, he's an oligarch, and but he is a truly secular guy. He hates.
So tell me if I got this right, because I'm always reading it from this country. You grew up there, you know the whole situation.
Yeah.
So I understand that he plays kingmaker. He had this relationship all the years. Netanyahu is a very skilled politician.
Yeah.
He's always called Israel's Trump. I think one big difference is he spent a lifetime in politics and diplomacy, and he's an operator in politics in a way that's just so skilled and thought out and strategic. And he always had this relationship with Lieberman, who came up from the bottom as a Russian emigre and kind of the tough guy, did his dirty work. And Lieberman always negotiated for power in this coalition government, but he didn't let this government form from the April election because he wouldn't agree to side with the religious fundamentalists on rights for the ultra-Orthodox. And if I'm not mistaken, he also wouldn't agree to protect Netanyahu from criminal prosecution, correct?
Yeah, but
he'll give in on that in a second if that means power.
Exactly. There's no real principle here.
Right.
And Netanyahu and Lieberman, they had this Cold War
right
that lasted a long time. I assume both knows a lot of secrets about each other, and it works for both. But then, Lieberman just blew everything up.
So now for 5 minutes, this guy Lieberman is a hero of what's left of the left in Israel because of this one issue. He's completely right-wing about territories and annexation of the West Bank.
Yeah.
but he's claiming to be the champion of not letting the religious have these exemptions from the army. But I'm getting the sense, Tzipi, that you think that's all just a show. Then in the end, he will come home to Netanyahu
Well,
and the government.
it only depends on what he can get. It only depends on
And what does he want to get?
Well, since nobody knows, to be honest, nobody knows, because we don't know what's really going on between these two guys, so nobody knows what he wants. And the thing is that you raised a very interesting and important point, that suddenly Lieberman is the hero of what used to be the left, because there is very little left of the left. And even you earlier you described Gantz as a center. No,
Center right.
he is what used to be Likud.
Yeah, these to be the right.
He used to be, center right. He used to be the right. Now he's center right. He's not very different than Netanyahu in matters of national security. I think the main difference that they have is about Iran. Gantz was in favor of the Iran deal, like the entire intelligence community in Israel.
And Netanyahu is saying he wants war with Iran, or claiming to. He wants to attack.
He wants to keep the threats.
Mm.
I don't know if he wants a war, but he need the threat. He need Israelis to be scared all the time. And you called him the Israeli Trump. I hear this all the time, obviously, but I gotta say that if I were Netanyahu, I would be offended.
Because Netanyahu is so skilled at foreign policy.
And because he's been in this game for decades. I mean, he's a diplomat.
Yeah.
He's a very smart guy. He is a book guy. He reads, he knows. He's incredibly cynic and probably very corrupt. But I think it's offensive to him to be compared to a guy who can hardly speak.
He's instead been made an alliance with Trump and other autocrats, like in Hungary.
Exactly.
He's kind of widing the political moment.
It's just survival. Yeah, he's very good in adapt to the moment. He will do whatever he need to survive. If the world were in a different place,
right, he'd be in a different place.
I can easily see him signing a two-state solution deal and doing whatever he need to do, because it's all about survival. There's very little principle over there.
And we're talking about, you might be feeling like you're hearing a little bit of American elections, but we're talking about the big election in Israel tomorrow on Tuesday, the do-over election. Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud coalition against Benny Gantz's Blue and White. And we're talking about Tzipi Shmilovitz, who's a New Haven-based correspondent for Israel's largest circulation newspaper, Yediot Ahronot. So now, when we're talking about the left and divided country, as we said, there's no longer what there was a decade ago, which was different views offered in a relevant way about how to deal with Palestinians and with the occupied territories.
That's true, with one exception, and that's the new thing in this election. There's a new party called the Democratic Camp, which was formed by Ehud Barak.
Oh,
former prime
minister.
Former prime minister.
A general who did seek a peace deal.
Yes. He used to be considered as the new Yitzhak Rabin after the Rabin assassination. It didn't quite work that way. And he was completely out of the game. But in the last couple of years, he came back. I think he is genuinely worried about Israeli democracy. And he formed a party that is, you can call them left. It's not compromising left. It's clearly a center left. They believe in two states, and it's an interesting collection of people from what used to be Meretz, which was the left
liberal party.
Some defected from the Labour Party.
And what's this party called? Democracy.
The Democracy Camp.
Okay. Now, do they have a chance at really winning enough seats that they could be a player in who the next government is?
Not according to the polls,
right?
Which is a little surprising, because it feels like this is what whatever left of the left really looking for.
Well, according to what I've been reading, again, this is from a distance, that Palestinian Arabs could play a role. That those who are citizens of Israel sat out the last election. In
Yeah,
general, a lot of them don't participate because they say it's apartheid, don't really have a voice. If we participate in the elections, that means we're acquiescing in our oppression. But at least what they're reporting is that Palestinian politicians have been under pressure this time to have a united front, because last time they were a bunch of little scattered parties,
yeah,
to try to actually win a good block of seats so they could be part of a government with Benny Gantz.
yeah.
Benny Gantz is under pressure. So Netanyahu is using this. He always scares the voters at the end
Exactly.
by what we call voters, fraud here. He says, he always makes these incredible statements about Arabs are going to run our country and vote, even though supposedly they're a democracy where
Yeah.
Arabs have a vote. And but is that true? Do you think that Arabs will vote more in this election and actually
Yeah,
change the government?
yeah. I'm sure they'll vote more than the last election.
And
I
they're
don't
more
know.
united this time.
Yeah,
The politicians.
there's only one party.
Yeah.
They went together, which they should have done a long time ago.
Yeah.
And according to the polls, they're gonna do very well. I'm not sure. I don't know. With the thing with Netanyahu is that he hardly gives any interviews to the Israeli media until it's 1 week before the election, and then he's just taking over. Then he's just like Trump.
He's so smart.
You cannot see.
Seriously.
He's a good politician,
He really is.
and in this week, most of the time he just scares the hell out of people. Now, yes, if Israeli Arabs will run to the polls as Netanyahu, yeah, I don't know if that can be a big factor. Benny Gantz is not a big fan of making a coalition
Right.
with the Arab Party, so I don't know if it's gonna change a lot, but this is really one of the very few questions for tomorrow:
Uh-huh.
whether the Israeli Arabs will go to the polls.
Mm. All right. Now, so there are 2.5 million Palestinians who cannot vote, and that they live in the West Bank. Now,
Yeah.
Netanyahu, as part of his pre-election surprise, is saying that contingent on his winning, he will annex parts of the West Bank that were developed by Israeli settlers without permission. But what surprised me is that the right, his target audience, at least again according to reports, and obviously our reports we get aren't as on the ground as what you would know, says that that's not going over. That people see it as a last-minute election ploy that they don't actually believe in, rather than seeing as getting what they've always wanted, which is they're just going to annex West Bank and make it greater Israel. That they think Netanyahu is just kind of faking to get their vote.
Yeah, it feels like that because it's a week before the election. I don't think it's going to have any effect one way or another. I don't think it's going to happen after the election.
Right.
But he's doing whatever he needs to do. He will say whatever he needs to say. There is a report today, this morning in Haaretz, that last week he warned people around him that he may have to postpone the election due to some national security issues, and we may have to go to a war in Gaza. That's few days
So
before.
he'd be willing to go to war to stop losing an election if his
few days-
polls say no.
Yeah, and that's, by the way,
That's a scary person.
if you want to know where Netanyahu's mindset is today, something like that proves that he is really worried. Because I think the best thing about Netanyahu as a prime minister is that he was never in a rush to go to war.
Right.
It's surprising, but if you look at his years as prime minister, he was very, very careful about going to war.
He always liked to threaten and then make the deal.
Yeah, I think this is...
That's one thing he and Lieberman broke over, right, at one point.
Yeah, but if you look at the history of Israel, Netanyahu is really one of, when it comes to actually go to a war, it's really one of the more dovish prime minister that we had.
In action.
in action. Yeah, when we talk about in action, I think it's related to the fact that he lost a brother.
Yeah.
His
The
brother
Tzipi
died
rape.
in yeah. So he knows how it feels. But that's but now that he was willing to postpone the election uh, by
Is
going
it
to
still
a war.
possible that would happen or no?
No, probably not, because it's tomorrow is the election, so it's probably not gonna happen.
So chances are, after the election, they're going to count up how many votes the Victor Laban's Beitenu party has, and then also how many the Arab parties have.
Yeah.
And then again, it is up to the president to tell which of the candidates Gantz or Netanyahu form a government. I didn't realize till you came on the show today that when he first gives Netanyahu the chance to run the government, form a government coalition, if he cannot do it, it's up to him, not the president, to talk about whether the other guy gets a chance or not, or
He
whether to
should
hold new elections.
he should because he was the prime minister of the transition government.
So again, is if the president had if what if so if the president lets Netanyahu go first, Gantz might not have a chance to go second if Lieberman doesn't go to a coalition, right?
It could be. It could be, which is why people think that maybe this time, if it's gonna end like the other election when it was pretty much tie, they had the same number of seats. Maybe this time President Rivlin will go with Gantz, um, because Rivlin is not a big fan of Netanyahu himself. So maybe he will go in with Gantz and will give him the first chance. Uh, all this won't matter if Gantz doesn't have the numbers.
And but then whether or not he has the numbers will partly depend on which camp Lieberman's.
Yes.
But that doesn't get known until they negotiate for the government, right? Isn't it a little bit chicken the egg? So here you have election day. You're trying to count up which coalition of parties has the most votes, but you don't know necessarily which coalition each party is in. Correct?
Yeah, and the president going to meet with each parties after the election, and he will ask them, who do you recommend should go first?
So interesting. It's so different from our system.
And then it's I don't like the American system. I think it's unfair, and
Winner take
and
all,
it's not
electoral
and it's
college.
not democratic, and the electoral college is just it's amazing to me.
It is crazy.
And you can get to a point where I think it's 6 of the last 7 presidential elections, Democrats won the popular vote, but they only got 2 presidents. So this is crazy. It's just.
Although to be fair, when the candidates run, they don't run for the popular vote. Like in other words, like everyone says Donald Trump didn't win because he won only electoral college. I actually don't agree with that, even though I'm not a fan of Trump, because Trump's team did a better job of knowing where to go to win the electoral votes.
Yeah.
So rather than run up the score in some state where they're already doing well, or the Democrats running up the score in California, New York, where they're winning anyway, he got those last 7 people in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So that doesn't mean he wouldn't have gotten the popular vote if it were different rules.
That's true, but we're talking about just the basic system.
Right, I'm not disagreeing with your point. I actually agree with your point. The electoral college is not democratic. It's archaic, and our country has changed, and the population being so much concentrated in the coast now.
Exactly.
But given that those are the rules, you can't look at any one election and say it wasn't the popular will. You're just saying someone did better knowing where to go.
No, I'm not. I'm not looking at one election. I'm looking at it's been
right. Democrats champion positions that the majority of the country wants, but that majority is concentrated in less than a majority of states.
Exactly.
And less populated states have the other view, but they get they get the same number of electoral votes.
It's a very, very, very old and just not the right system. But the system in Israel is probably worse.
So what would be a good system?
It's so messy.
Just straight ahead popular vote, winner takes all?
Where, here or there?
What would be better? What about proportional representation? Where you vote, you rank the people you want. You know how that works? They're trying out in a few places here. Yeah. I got to admit, I'm a huge fan of it, because then it's not always lesser of two evils. You could say, like, here's my first choice, here's my second, my third, so that if your choice doesn't emerge at each round, you get rid of the lowest ranking person, then redistribute the votes from people's second choices.
Yeah.
And then have a runoff. I don't know.
I think that the basic should be a popular vote. Whoever gets the most vote need to be president, prime minister, whatever.
And tomorrow they're going to be looking for new Parliament and Prime Minister in Israel, and we're talking about that on Dateline New Haven with a resident expert. You might not even know New Haven. We have Tzipi Shmilovitz, who lives on Audubon Street and writes for Israel's largest circulation newspaper, Yediot Ahronot. Now, what about this thing where Facebook suspended the account of Prime Minister Netanyahu's son for violating their hate speech code? He wrote something about it urged supporters to come to the polls to prevent the advent of, quote, a dangerous left-wing government whose Jewish leaders would support Arab politicians who, quote, according to Netanyahu's son, want to destroy us all, men, children, and women, and enable a nuclear Iran to wipe us out. Does people are you allowed? You can run like that in I guess you can run like that in America now with Trump.
Yeah, let me tell you something. Netanyahu wasn't like that before Trump arrived. He wouldn't do all these things out of the open. He wouldn't, and I'm pretty sure that his son wouldn't be like that if he didn't look up to Trump and his sons and all that. Um, Netanyahu's son is is a piece of work. Um, I don't really know what's going on there, but um, it's not even extreme. It's sometimes just crazy.
Well, now you grew up in Israel. How do you feel about the state of your country now, the policy?
I'm I'm quite devastated, to be honest.
How come?
Um, well, that's not the country I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I get that most of the country can go either way when it comes to national security and all that. It's an incredibly complicated story. But becoming anti-democracy, that's serious.
And in what ways is it becoming anti-democracy in addition to that?
Well, let's start with the fact that you have a prime minister who's been in charge in all kinds of crimes,
Mm-hmm.
and you can indict him, and he's just he's just going to sit there in the prime minister house, and I don't know, never leave. Um, but then you have all the what we're looking at, um, a very religious, regressive government. Um, you know, it's and a country that is so not welcoming and
Mm-hmm.
so not uh, pluralistic and so not everything that was, that made Israel a beacon in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And now, the world is very, very dark. And this is not even about how do you feel whether we should go to, the States or whatever, or war in Iran or not war against Iran. This is about people who can speak up. This is about violence. Um, this is about the way we treat immigrants, refugees, black people, things that we didn't see in Israel.
Mm.
So I think it's an extraordinary dark place right now.
Mm. How does it compare to America on those scores?
The problem with America is that it happens so much faster than in Israel. In Israel, it's like it's a process. It's been pretty much since Rabin assassination. So we're talking about 20 something years. I think in America it happens much faster. On the other hand, in America, until further notice, it can only last 8 years. So at some point, you'll have a new president.
I believe if Trump gets elected, he might suspend the two-term rule.
That's why I said. That's what I said until further notice. And people think it's a joke, and
it's not a joke.
It's not a joke at all. And I'm not sure that even if he loses in 2020, I don't know if he's leaving voluntarily. I don't know if you're going to see a peaceful transition of power.
People say it was stolen. So what do you what would be if you had a magic wand and you could reset the policies in Israel? How would you still pursue a two-state solution? What do you think is the goal for people who had a former view on how Israel should deal with its Arab population, with its neighbors?
Two states is the ideal. I don't know if we can. I don't know if it's not too late at this point.
And if it is too late, what do you do next?
That's a good question.
It is a
That's
tough
a good question. Maybe that's why I don't run for anything.
I've always had this view, very ignorant because I don't have details, that Netanyahu's answer to that question wasn't some grand plan, but get till tomorrow
Yeah.
and be savvy. So he was so savvy in a quiet way for decades, making deals with Saudi Arabia behind the scenes, with Putin in Russia. I believe even having back channel meetings with Hamas about how to temper attacks back and forth.
He pays the money.
Yeah.
They-
And so I
He
think
pays
that
them.
until Trump gave what he claimed he wanted by having the embassy in Jerusalem and
Yeah.
that stuff, that made it harder for him to continue on that path
Yeah.
of just kind of get there till tomorrow because it incited a backlash. And that he was succeeding in getting the world not to care about Palestinians until Trump was in.
That's an interesting view.
But you know so much more, am I right?
No,
I
no.
stopped seeing any support in any big way for Palestinians, that Israel could do whatever it wanted. In fact, when Trump made these moves, it did not provoke the kind of violence we thought it would, but it did put it back on the agenda. I felt that Arab countries always used the Palestinian plight cynically because Jordan didn't want to help Palestinians, Saudi Arabia didn't want to help Palestinians. They use it as a way to keep their own internal critics in check by focusing the hatred on Israel.
Yeah.
And that Netanyahu just kind of negotiated that while they got the world to turn its attention to other places, so everyone just forgot about the Palestinians.
Yeah, that's true. I think that what he did very well, unfortunately, is they kind of dehumanized the
Yeah.
Palestinians. They're not people that anybody
Right.
cares about. Even the Arab states doesn't care about
That's what I meant.
Palestinians.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about them, and so at this point, it's like, hey, another thing that he did quite well is to create the impression that Israel and Palestinian are two equal entities and they just fight against each other when no, one side is occupying the other side and the other side lives in horrendous conditions.
Yeah.
And it's not how the world is looking at the Palestinians today. Really nobody cares. But it's unsustainable. No matter how much you postpone and delay and you wait until tomorrow, it's unsustainable because it will blow up.
Yeah.
You have 2.5 million people in Gaza living in, really, there's nothing half human in the way they live there. It's unsustainable. You have to find some solution. You have to. Now, Netanyahu is somebody who had the power to do it because,
If that's what he were interested in, the way
Yes.
that Sharon even wanted to make agreement. Do you think it's possible both sides know what the agreement is, that it was sketched out, like how many refugees Palestinians would be able to, a small amount, return to certain places and the others would get a financial settlement? I always thought they kind of knew what the deal was, but neither side had the political will to make it happen.
yeah, I
Not
don't
sure.
know what the deal was.
I thought it was even detailed at a certain time and fell apart.
I will tell you this. What really, the guy who killed Yitzhak Rabin in 1995, it's probably the most successful political assassination
Right.
in the history of this world.
It is
At the-
amazing.
at
After
least
the
the
world
modern
outpouring
history.
for
At
Rabin, then it went away in Israel.
He just won completely,
Yeah.
and because Rabin was on the verge of getting, it was more than just peace with the Palestinians. He was about to talk with Assad, and strike a deal with
Wow.
Syria. He had a deal with Jordan. He was about to just really end this whole mess. And
And the Israeli settlers weren't going to let him.
and they killed him because they knew that he was about to fix this whole thing and they wouldn't let him. And now we are 24 years.
Wow. Time goes on.
time goes and goes fast. But the last 24 years, it's been nothing but downhill for Israel,
Do you
for
have
the
any
Middle
hopes
East.
for tomorrow? Like if Benny Gantz prevails, are you going to feel some optimism, some measured optimism? Will there be an open window now for some potential change?
I just won't feel like it's still the place that there is some shred of the place I grew up in. I just won't feel that democracy is winning. Uh, my biggest, the thing that depressed me the most is the fact that people may not go to vote tomorrow because they are so, they just fed up and they just don't care anymore.
So, any predictions for tomorrow's election in Israel? What do you think is going to happen? Come on, be a pundit.
Can
This
be
is your chance to like scratch your chin.
I'll be shocked if Gantz gets more seats than Netanyahu. He may get one or two more, but it's insignificant.
You think Avigdor Lieberman will go with Netanyahu and that'll be the coalition government, or you think it'll be the Israeli religious right?
He
winning
will.
enough?
Nobody knows what Avigdor Lieberman gonna do tomorrow. Nobody knows.
But you think Netanyahu is going to win in the end?
I think in the end, yes.
And do you think he'll have enough coalition partners who will agree that he can't be prosecuted while he's in government?
Yeah.
Price of.
Yeah.
So not a lot of optimism.
You know, I'm Jewish. I'm Polish. You cannot get optimism from me.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
But we did get a great visit with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for enlightening us about the election tomorrow.
Thank you for having me.
I want to thank today's guest, Tzipi Shmilovitz. And if you want to read her, she lives in New Haven and she writes for Israel's largest circulation newspaper, Yedidot Achronot. I want to thank Bertram Moses PC and Gateway Community College and Yellow Haven Hospital for running support-based program. And thanks to the miracle man behind the controls, WNHH station manager, Harry Droz. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.